And it's Summer Chaudhary, which is senior software developer, and also will join Summer Laura Joldersma. She's software developer and clinical data manager. And they both have more than 20 years combined experience with DFdiscover. Laura and Summer, I think you have already a co-host, right? So let's listen and learn from your experience.
Thank you, Rebecca. Can you hear me fine? To confirm.
Yeah. All good.
Thank you, and thanks for sending me a reminder that I'm not allowed to go over my time. Anyway,
a couple of minutes, because we are 3 minutes ahead of time, so.
I'm very much afraid of you. I'll try not to. Anyway, jokes aside, hello DFUG community. What a great audience you are, particularly for joining the first ever virtual DFUG. Where in the meeting, the only food that you've been served with is food for thought. So thanks everyone for being here. My name is Summer Chaudhary. I'm a senior software developer at DFNet. With me today is Laura Joldersma, who is a clinical data management specialist at DFNet, who will join me to present what's new in DFdiscover since the last DFUG. Let me open up my chat so I can also see what's going on. So I'll be providing an overview of new features in DFdiscover 5.3 and 5.4. And Laura will speak about eCRF updates later on. So at DFUG 2019, as some of you may recall, we presented DFdiscover 2019, which was released shortly after in November that year. At the end of that DFUG, in the looking forward presentation, our team also shared a list of features coming to DFdiscover in the near future. Several of those features, I'm happy to announce, several of those features which were promised in DFUG 2019 have been delivered in the recent releases. So we have had 2 releases since DFdiscover 2019. DFdiscover version 5.3, which was released in 2020, and version 5.4 was recently released in May of this year. Many improvements and updates have been made to DFdiscover in these 2 releases. So changes were made across the board from DFdiscover server to desktop applications, as well as DFweb and DFcollect mobile application, along with enhancements to the DFdiscover API. Although today we'll touch upon some of the new features which have been included in these releases, a full list of features and improvements can be found in the release notes. And also in the Knowledge Hub page on our website, you will find previous webinar recordings introducing each of these 2 releases. So we'll shed some light on subject aliases, 2-factor authentication, lookup tables in DFweb and Collect, local cache, study logos, new documents panel in DF Explorer, being some of the new features. And also, we'll talk about translations editor for multi-language support in ePro apps, and also how to manage attached subject documents using the API, tabular listing reports, custom properties and metadata descriptions, and eCRF updates. I think all of you are aware that our entire development team is online, and we would love to answer your questions at the end. So DataFacts and DFdiscover have always supported numeric subject identifiers. However, in the most recent years, and as trials move to more EDC-based solutions, the restriction for numeric identifiers has been loosened. It is becoming quite common to have subject identifiers that are now a combination of alphanumeric characters. such as digits, alphabets in upper and lower cases, and some special characters. And here you can see some examples I've listed. So DFdiscover users with our new solution are able to define alphanumeric subject alias that are mapped to existing numeric subject IDs. Each numeric subject ID can be assigned a unique subject alias, which can be composed of up to 30 Unicode characters. Subject alias is effectively a label for numeric subject ID, and it is maintained in studies subject alias map, which of course can be edited using the setup tool. As you can see on the right side, a screenshot of subject alias map, where an ID is mapped to a specific subject alias. While subject alias map provides interface to define subject alias for each numeric subject ID, a preference enables DFdiscover applications to use subject alias in place of numeric ID. So when enabled, DFdiscover applications display subject alias instead of a subject ID. And functions have also been made available for users to use subject alias in error checks. Here in this screenshot, you will see that both the subject binder and data entry window now display subject aliases instead of numeric IDs. And also the API has been updated to include requests that offer interaction with subject alias map to retrieve subject alias for a subject ID, or vice versa, being able to get subject ID for a subject alias. Next, I will talk about two-factor authentication. Like many other security enhancements, two-factor authentication is becoming a widely used security layer. It offers user accounts protection against breach by hackers or fraud attacks due to compromised passwords. Two-factor authentication can be configured by an admin for each user independently, though the user email is essential in order to enable two-factor authentication to function. When enabled, upon user login, the security code is sent to the user via email. Very similar to something you have seen in other applications such as Gmail or Outlook or other applications. So this 6-digit security code is required in the login dialog to complete two-factor authentications. Users will not be able to continue without providing this security code, which is also bound by a time limit. There are some additional security features. I will not go into much detail. I'll just let you explore this through our documentation, and I'll move on. So next, I will speak about lookup table functionality, which has already been recognized by you as a legacy DFdiscover feature, providing a mechanism for coding information based on a key field, which has several uses, where drug name lookup is one of the most common use. Now, you can see that lookup table functionality is available in DFCollect and DFWeb with the most recent release of DFdiscover. So here are a few screenshots of DFWeb and DFCollect. And you will notice that the interface of lookup table dialog is very similar to what you are used to seeing in DFExplore. Rather, they're a little simpler. In DFadmin's study properties panel, the study admins now have an option to enable local cache, which allows caching of study setup and configuration on users' local devices. So when this setting is enabled, the startup speed of desktop applications such as DFExplore is optimized. This eliminates each application's need to fetch frequently requested properties such as study logos, study setup, and configuration files on subsequent uses or logins. While some of the study properties are cached, the subject records are never cached for obvious reasons. Although any user can clear their cache from file menu in DF Explorer, under normal circumstances, it is not necessary as DF Explorer efficiently manages the local cache. And the next one is study logos. This is pretty obvious, so I will quickly go through it. Study logos are a unique visual identifier, which is becoming a growing trend where we see more and more studies having unique logo. And it's a small image that is uploaded by a system or admin in the study directory. And thereon, it is used throughout DFdiscover in various places such as study selection dialogues, DF Explorer tabular listing reports, as well as you will see it in DF web data entry windows and other views. And in the next few screens, you will see some of the examples how study logos are appearing in the login dialog or in tabular listing reports on the top left, and likewise in DF web and other places such as DF admin studies list. In DF Explorer, it is already possible to attach supporting documents, which you are already familiar with. To offer better user experience, a new document panel, more interactive document panel has been added in DFdiscover 5.4. So this display, or it was added to display, a new document panel basically offers much more interactive and cleaner look, and it is available on the screen while you're doing data entry. I'll show you in a bit. The preference, however, when enabled in DF Explorer preferences settings, will let you see this new documents panel, and it is fully featured panel that makes attaching documents to the current record simpler and faster with the drag and drop functionality. This also makes it easy to review documents in the image view by traversing through documents list, which was previously only possible by opening the review images dialog from the menu. Text translations for growing need of ePro apps such as DF Engage, supporting data entry directly by subjects from around the world, we have implemented an editor to provide multiple language text translations for field prompt, description, and coding labels. And it was implemented, as I mentioned, specifically for API clients. Again, I will quickly go through it. This is the interface that you will see in Setup tool, and it lets you also import or export translations if you would like to have some third party, someone outside of your study team to go through and provide translations for various terms from setup. It was already possible in the DFdiscover API to fetch or upload documents and attach it to a subject record. Now we have functionality to be able to change a document from secondary to primary, or even if you want to delete it, it is now available in the new API. Another feature added to DF Explorer is tabular listing reports. Tabular listing reports create tables from the data that is selected by previously defined views in DF Explorer's list view, thus extending the flexibility of presenting customized tabular data views in more ways. So another nice feature that I would like to highlight here is this provides a convenient way to share the results of defined views with others within the study team using reports view or outside of the study team by saving the output as HTML or Excel. And of course, you can double click on specific field and be able to directly go to data view in DF Explorer. There are also standard tabular listings, but anyway, this information I will skip on, so you can explore more in using our user guides. So there's one last item that I would like to mention about before handing over to Laura. In DFdiscover 2019, user-defined properties were introduced, adding the capability of defining custom properties. And you saw this feature in action during Martin Renter's presentation yesterday, where he added a user-defined field property called field priority. For clarity, in DFdiscover 5.4, the user-defined properties dialog has been renamed to custom properties. And you will see this term being used throughout our applications onwards. Having said, I was thinking about providing some more details, but I would like to talk about one change that has been made to custom properties, and it is which is the possibility of assigning custom property descriptions or metadata descriptions as seen in this screenshot. You will notice there are two study level custom properties defined, which not only have a custom tag, but also description has been entered at the top. And similarly, at the bottom, 3 metadata field descriptions have been defined in this view near the bottom. So here is a closer look at one of those metadata properties and how a user-friendly description has been provided. So DF study year _ year, a user-friendly description, year started is being provided in the custom properties dialog. And its use, of course, is when you export data or in tabular listing reports, you are able to select from the options menu, be able to see either field names or descriptions in the header. And the only difference between these two screenshots is in the bottom one, you're able to see the field descriptions. Next, I would request Laura Joldersma from our team to shed some light on ECRF updates in DFdiscover. Laura.
Thank you, Samer. Can everyone see my screen now?
Yep.
Yes.
Great. So before I talk about the updates that we've made related to ECRFs in the latest version of DFdiscover, I kind of want to give more of a background on ECRFs for those of you who haven't used it and share some things that we've learned here at DFNet as we've implemented ECRFs in our studies. So basically when I say ECRF in the context of DFdiscover, that's a CRF without a background. So, you know, obviously a CRF with a background can be an electronic CRF, but for DFdiscover, the eCRF, there's no background. So you don't have to first design your CRF in FrameMaker or Word or InDesign or whatever tool you're using. And you don't have to import those PDFs into DF Setup. Instead, you're just adding the fields directly to a plate, and then those fields get displayed one per row on the CRF. So that results in a nice, simple and streamlined CRF. So here on the left-hand side is a CRF with a background, and then on the right-hand side is an eCRF. And both of these forms are collecting the same data, but the layout is just a little bit different. So on the left-hand side, the form was designed in Word first. I had to export that Word file to a PDF. I had to import that into DF Setup, and I had to draw those widgets and then add the fields. But when I designed the eCRF, it's a lot simpler. I didn't have to do anything in Word, didn't need to create a PDF. Instead, I add that plate to DF Setup, and then I can just drag and drop my fields onto the plate from the module fields. So the process of, defining your module fields within each of the modules in the system, that all still works the same, but once those module fields are set up, you're just dragging and dropping them over, which makes things a lot simpler. It does require a little bit of a different way of designing your CRFs, because you're not creating your FrameMaker or your Word form ahead of time, but you do need to know, what fields do we need on each of the forms, what plates are required for this CRF. There are some options that are available when you're designing a form as an eCRF, and so Michael Holdsworth covered a lot of these in the contents in the context of DFcollect. And so I'm talking about more in the context of DFexplore, but a lot of things are very similar. So for example, grouped fields and units, the way we saw what Michael shared with us about how things look in DFcollect, things look very similar in DFexplore and DFweb. The difference is with screen headings, instead of when you use a screen break, instead of breaking those into small sections that you can swipe through in DFcollect, they could just get displayed as headings on the eCRF in DFcollect and in DFweb. And the choice field option works similarly in DFexplore, but DFexplore has an extra couple of features that I'll share with you that aren't available in DFweb and DFcollect. So the order field dialog is where some of these eCRF design options are available. So this is where you would add your screen headings, as well as where you would reorder your fields. And this is also where you can group fields. You can do the grouping directly on the eCRF, as we saw in Michael Holdsworth's presentation as well. Here's some examples of group fields, the way they would look in DFexplore. So, you know, the classic example is the select all that apply series of checkboxes, like race here. We also like to group the other specified text field with the check field or the choice field where the other is specified, because you don't really need that extra text to specify other specify below that. So we like grouping it that way. And, you know, sort of the lab results, the sort of tabular format that you would normally create on a background. We saw with DFcollect too, very similar idea with the hemoglobin result example here. You're sort of recreating the tabular format in more of a vertical way rather than a horizontal way. And also things like if you're collecting both the date and time together, you could group those fields and modify the prompt so that the prompt is referring to both of those fields. And so if you're asking, and also if you're asking, you know, whether an event is ongoing and there's an end date that you want to provide, if it's a no, you can group those together too and modify the prompt. And I really like using group fields because it helps break up some of the monotony of the prompt fields all along the left-hand side of the eCRF and gives some visual changes within the eCRF. So the show as field property is available just for choice fields. And so we saw in Michael's presentation, there's the drop-down option and then the fixed list, the choices option. And those are both used in DFweb and DFcollect. Specific to DFexplore though, there are a couple of other options within the show as field property. So in my first example here, relationship to study procedure, I have 5 choices in this choice field. And so I've specified to show them in 5 columns. And so this means that all the choices get displayed together in one row. But in my second example, I have 6 choices and I've said to show them in 2 columns. And so this results in 3 choices in 2 different columns. So based on, you know, how many choices you have in your question, how long the text is in your choice labels, you can decide and play around with what number of columns works best to make your eCRF look nice. So the other option within the show as field property is a label position. So here I have a question related to the seriousness of an adverse event. And so it's just a series of yes/no questions. And so I don't need to repeat my yes/no label for each of these questions. I just want to show it once as a label for all of the radio buttons in this section. So what I've done for the first field is show the label position at the top. And then for all the rest of the fields in this section, the label position is set to none. So that just says only show the label for that first field, don't show anything for the next, but when you look at it on the eCRF, it's very clear what those labels are for. And then the other cool thing with eCRFs is being able to hide conditional fields, so restricting what you actually see on the CRF as you're doing data entry to only those fields that are required. So this is an example where I have a yes/no question that asks whether, you know, an assessment or a procedure is done. And because I haven't answered yes or no yet, I don't see any other fields yet on that CRF. So we do this using the DF access function in an EdCheck, which we place both on field enter and on field exit so that things change as the data gets entered. So if I answer yes, I see all the assessment details that I need to provide because the assessment has been done. Whereas if I answer no, I then see the text field that asks me for the reason to explain why the assessment wasn't done. Okay, so now I'll finally talk about the features that we've added in the most recent version of DFdiscover that are related to ECRFs. So the first one is printing blank ECRFs. So this is in DFexplore 5.4. So there's now an option within the Save as PDF or Print dialog to uncheck or check the print subject ID. So what that means is, previously when you printed blank CRFs from DFexplore, it would always include the subject ID. The rest of the data would be empty, but you would see the subject ID. But being able to do this from DFexplore, if you are designing your CRFs not in FrameMaker or Word, you might not have that separate PDF file where you can send your CRFs for review, for approval, for filing in the trial master file. You can now print those from DFexplore and then share those as needed as a PDF file. And then the second new feature is printing annotated ECRFs. So this is available now in DFsetup 5.4. And so this is pretty much the exact same as a blank CRF, except it has those annotations on the right-hand side. So that includes the module name, the module instance number, the field number, as well as the field name. So the annotations that you see on the CRFs with backgrounds now are now available with the CRFs as well. All right, and then just to quickly sum up what Samer and I have talked about. He talked about our API enhancements to support DFWeb, DFCollect, DFEngage, and other API tools. We've made performance improvements related to local caching, faster loading, and others. We've made security improvements, notably the two-factor authentication, and we've added some new features such as subject aliases, study logos, the document panel, and DFexplore, as well as tabular listings. And I hope I've made a case for ECRFs as an option to support faster CRF development and database setup. And now we welcome your questions.
Thank you, Laura. Eric has been doing a great job in the meantime, because I think, Eric, you've been answering some of them on the chat.
Wasn't so much an answer, just to see if what Laura was speaking about was helping Jason. Yeah.
Thanks anyway. So I'm checking. Okay, Jason, just for you to know, Laura, Jason asked, how do we route ECRFs for review to study teams? And yeah. Eric, and Eric made a clarification, but Jason is answering. Maybe just explain the process of routing CRFs for review to teams.
Yeah, I saved that for the very end.
Rebecca, I see a question from Nita regarding, can subject alias be automatically populated based on pattern in DFexplore? So,
yes, I was
Nita,
thank you.
No worries. So while we were implementing this, we were debating whether we need to implement the Microsoft Excel, like options within our setup tool, and give you all the options that one would have in Excel to be able to create different patterns and be able to. So it seems like many of our clients are using different applications and are more used to importing from other spreadsheets. So while we're working on it, while we are debating, I think it is much, in cases where you are actually mapping and more would like to use patterns, doing it in something external and then importing that using the setup tool is what we have provided so far. Eric, would you like to add anything to it?
No, I think that's exactly right, Samer. We know there's lots of other tools to generate these things. What we allow you to do to speed up the subject alias definition is exactly what you said. Give me a text file or give DFsetup a text file, and that the work is basically done.
Thanks.
Thanks, Samer. Right below Nita, we have a question from Pascal. Are there plans for two-factor authentication functionality using SMS or Google authentication app?
Well, the plans are there for everything. But what we can achieve, that is the question. For two-factor authentication, the key is we need to be able to have a second way of verifying that the other person who is trying to access is actually that person. So if we would be considering a text message, that means that user would need to provide their cell phone and possibly also a cell phone provider in their user profile. But that option, as we all know, it's not available. The most reliable option and the most reliable piece of information that we have is email at this point, which is trusted, and that's what we have used. If our user community feels that there are a possibility of providing cell phones and other piece of information that should be added to our software, then definitely we can look into it down the road.
Great. Thank you, Summer. Megan has a question for Laura. With the annotated CRF generation, do the entire field name populate with the new feature, as opposed to maybe longer ones getting cut off?
Yeah, the full field name is displayed. I don't think we've, so for the maximum number of characters allowed in a field name, it does display. It's different from when you have a background and you might have limited real estate for where the field name's shown, but we have more space on the ECRFs.
Great. And Brian is asking if we would recommend using Microsoft Word and the barcode tool for CRF design. Robert is saying that they use the barcode and Microsoft Word, but what's your recommendation?
I know we use FrameMaker here at DFNet. I know several others who also do use Word, and it works well if your CRFs are nice and simple. If you do have complicated paper CRFs, personally I like FrameMaker better. It has more powerful features. But yeah, anything that you can use that will generate a PDF, you can use that when you're using CRFs with backgrounds. Okay.
And Summer, Andres is just congratulating you, and he loves the idea of integrating tabular listings with the data view, just for you to know. And we were having the last question from Aslam. Are there any plans to make setup easier by having a setup import feature? For example, Data Manager creates all variable names in an Excel file.
I'm so glad you said that, Aslam, because that's something I want too. It's one of the items on our long list of things we'd like to add in the future. So it's definitely in consideration. I know how much easier it will make setup if we can define all of our variables at the beginning in one place and then just import them all.
Great, thank you, Laura. Thank you, Summer, for this closing presentation. It seems we've came up to the end of these 2 days.